Welcome to People's Action Live. I'm Tim Wilkins, and we are a national network of grassroots groups, over 1 million members in 38 states. And it's May 1st, which should be a day for workers everywhere to celebrate, has turned into a moment of crisis. With more than 1 million people sick with coronavirus nationwide, more than 30 million unemployed, it's turning into a moment of anxiety and danger. But could that danger also be an opportunity? Joining us to talk about this are some great guests. We have Harmony Goldberg from the Grassroots Policy Project, John Washington and Tara Raghuveer from the People's Action National Homes Guarantee. But to get us started, I'm going to first play a little video to get us thinking about this moment we're in.
Around the world and throughout the nation, we are in a moment of crisis. To date, the COVID-19 virus has infected nearly 2 million people and has taken the lives of tens of thousands worldwide, with the death count growing each day. On every block, in every neighborhood, there is a shared feeling of danger as our lives and livelihoods are threatened, our sense of normalcy is destroyed, and the gravity of what's at stake weighs down on each of us. But what we may not immediately recognize is that crises present us with both grave dangers and big openings for change.
Harmony Goldberg, thank you so much for joining us on People's Action Live. What is a crisis? To your mind, how did we get to where we are at this moment?
A social crisis is a moment when we can either become more whole and healthy as a people or take a turn for the worse as a society. And we are definitely in a moment of social crisis. Moments of social crisis are both moments of danger and opportunity, like we saw in the video, right? And in this moment, there's two levels of danger that we're facing. There's the immediate impacts on people's lives, which you mentioned, Tim, right? Tens of thousands of people dying from this disease, 1 million people impacted, 30 million people filing for unemployment. The rent is due today. Those kind of immediate dangers, but there's another kind of danger in this moment that people in power are going to take advantage of this moment and make life even harder for our communities in the future. We've already seen huge corporate bailouts where the richest people in our society are getting the most support from our government while we struggle. There's additional kinds of dangers. A lot of us are scared that Trump will use this as an opportunity to cancel the election and undermine our democracy. We've seen a debate about whether or not the federal government should leave states in the lurch and drive them into bankruptcy, which is going to create immense dangers for our communities. So it's those levels of danger, right? We need to look at the immediate dangers, but also the dangers of how the rich and powerful might change our society for the worse. But moments of crisis are also real moments of opportunity. We're in this mess because the richest people in our society have undermined our government so much that it's not set up to help us weather this storm. And this crisis sets up a chance for us to choose a different path as a society. And that's because crises have historically opened up space for radical organizers and for social movements to advance real transformative change. The best example of this that we all know sort of historically is the Great Depression. It was a crisis that had hundreds of thousands and millions of people facing unemployment, starvation, real struggle. But the social movements that came out of that period, they were the ones that won us the New Deal, the basic protections that we see as normal today, right? The minimum wage, Social Security, the right to unionize, right? Those are real transformative changes that came out of a moment of crisis. And in this moment, there's openings for us as well, because the only way out of this crisis is for us to rebuild a government that functions for the common good. We're going to have to rein in the free market. We're going to have to tax the rich to pay for the social programs that our communities need to weather this crisis.
Harmony, I know you have spent a lot of time thinking about the origins and the sources of this moment of crisis. And certainly, as you point out, this could potentially be a great opportunity as the Great Depression turned out to be a moment to rethink really the foundations of our society and what we would like to see come out of this. But I want to dig in a little bit with you because I know you're an expert on this, thinking about how did we get here. I'm going to play another clip.
Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies and to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable.
Milton Friedman, that quote that we heard, it's a reflection of the fact that they had these ideas to restructure society that seemed crazy at the time that they were advancing them in the 1960s, right? During that time, most people saw government as the only way to rein in the free market that had driven us into that Great Depression. They saw government as a way to provide support and security to poor and working people. Where the folks who were moving this corporate agenda believed that we should tear apart the government, right? Because it's a government that restrained corporations from making unlimited profits. They saw that it didn't work if they just went out there and put those ideas out there. Barry Goldwater, he ran for president in 1964, and he directly attacked Social Security. It's one of the programs these folks hate most. He directly attacked Social Security, and that seemed so insane that his campaign for president, it tanked. And so they learned that they couldn't change ideas, that they couldn't advance their radical policies in normal times. So they learned that they had to look for crises as openings to move their agenda. So when the oil crisis hit in the 70s, when the economy went into the stagflation crisis then, Milton Friedman and his friends, they stepped in and they sold what seemed like impossible and insane ideas at the time. They sold them as the only and the inevitable solutions to the problems in the economy. And it worked. Today, it is totally normal to see Social Security as a broken program. It is totally normal to see government as the problem and free market as the solution. So there's one thing we can know for sure. If we don't step into the fight in this moment of crisis, we can know that the richest people in our society are prepared to step in and make sure it turns out in our favor.
Another more recent moment of crisis that all of us can relate to is 2008, because it was not that long ago. Many of us lost our jobs then, lost our houses. Let me play another piece of video about that moment. I want to get your thoughts on that.
When Wall Street crashed our economy, stripping millions of homes, jobs, and pensions, they immediately sought to take advantage of the crisis they created by lobbying for a huge taxpayer-funded bailout. This time, we were more prepared to step into that opening and fight back, but we still didn't have the power we needed to rebuild an economy that worked for all of us in the wake of the financial crisis. So they got their bailout. But we kept working, organizing loads of new people and helping them make meaning of the pain and loss they were experiencing, and putting forward big ideas around what a new economy could look like.
Looking at 2008 is it's a helpful example to help us see that while crises create openings for social movements to advance new agendas, it is not inevitable that we're going to be able to make those advances. We were able to change ideas, especially after the Occupy movement took hold in 2011, but we weren't able to really land those ideas deeply among the majority of people, and we weren't really able to shift those ideas into policy change. And so we were left fighting for things like, let's have the CEOs return the bonuses they got. That's an important demand. We should have been demanding to nationalize the banks, right? They were the ones that got us into the mess. They're going to keep doing this unless we restructure our society so that they aren't in charge. And so that's one example of the kind of lesson that we can learn about how we need to approach organizing in this moment of crisis. We need to make bold demands, because in moments of crisis, incremental reforms, they don't make sense anymore because they don't meet the actual needs in people's lives. And so today, things that would have seemed radical and impossible just 4 months ago, ideas like cancel rent, ideas like the government should make regular cash payments to working families, ideas like Medicare for all, those seem natural because they're the things that people need in their lives to get by day to day. And what's important about that is not just what happens with emergency programs in this moment of crisis, but if we can win those emergency programs right now, it changes the baseline of what we think is possible in our society. It'll change the baseline of what we expect from our government, of what we think we can do in relationship to the free market, and change what's possible in the long run. So one of the things we can take from 2008 and apply today is the need to go bold. I think a second lesson that we can take that we actually did well in that time is that crises are moments when we can make meaning. When crises hit, the old ideas, they don't work in the same way anymore because people's lives are changing and things aren't working. And so old ideas, they don't make sense in the same way. And people need new ways to make meaning out of their changing reality, out of their suffering and their struggles. And if we don't, old ideas will creep in, right? In 2008, for a long time, people blamed themselves for shaky mortgages. And it took time for us to realize that the banks had set us up for this, right? We can step in right now and name the culprits right away, name the corporate profiteers who have destroyed our government and made it difficult for that government to step in and actually contain this crisis. Right now, for example, they are blaming China and immigrants for this crisis, where we can step into that battle and say, no, like whether we are white, black, brown, or Asian, we need each other to get through this crisis, right? Racism and division is not the solution. It's leaning on each other and supporting each other that is helping us survive this crisis. We can step in and say, no, the free market's not our solution. It's a government for the common good that's the solution. So the second lesson is stepping into the battlefield of ideas and swinging hard. And I would say the third lesson that we can take from that time is the need to build power. In moments of crisis, none of this, what I'm saying is none of it's going to be possible unless we radically expand the number of people who are engaged in social change work. But luckily, in a moment of crisis, we can actually grow much more rapidly because huge numbers of people are having their lives rocked and are looking for ways to a different future. And so if we can step into that and find ways to reach people and help them deal with the isolation that they're facing, deal with the day-to-day struggles they're facing, and give them a way to plug into community and collective struggle and find collective solutions to our problems, we can grow rapidly and build the power that we need to win these demands to change ideas. And People's Action is one of the most organizations that's stepping most into that, running a massive texting and phone banking program to reach out to people, to see how they're doing, what they need, and to try to make sure that people have an on-ramp to get involved in collective solutions today.
Thank you so much, Harmony. Speaking of stepping into the breach and going bold, when we think of that here at People's Action, there's no stronger example of that than our Homes Guarantee campaign. So I want to bring in John Washington from Buffalo, New York in just a second to talk about that. But first, I'd like to invite everyone. The excerpts of that video that you just saw are part of a series from our a series of videos developed out of our political education program that Harmony has produced. And if you're interested in that, if you would like to know more, I suggest that you go to peoplesaction.org/crisis. You can see that full video, and we're going to have more coming out in the coming weeks and months. So if you're interested in political education, that's the place to go, peoplesaction.org/crisis. Now, John Washington, you are in Buffalo, New York. You're a leader with our National Homes Guarantee campaign. Tell me a little bit, what do you see where you are? What do you see on the ground?
We're seeing people in deep poverty. Buffalo is the third poorest and sixth most segregated city in the country. So we're seeing all of that worsen. And then we're seeing people come together around a demand for testing. We went about a month and a half in this crisis where they'd only done 250 tests in Buffalo. And we're just getting those testing resources mainly because of the organizing work of a lot of people who are really stepping up. So I think what's happening is people in Buffalo have been beaten down by neoliberalism for generations. And I think this is really creating a crisis in the minds of people about what our society looks like, why it is the way it is, and really giving them nothing to lose in really stepping up to make their values real in the world. There's a lot of mutual aid work that's going on that's really beautiful. There are a lot of people coming together in the face of this oppression. And it's, I think, a really inspiring moment. While we may not be at the level of New York City or LA, I do see the groundwork and infrastructure being built for a lot more organizing, a lot more community care work. And I think folks are just setting aside a lot of the small differences that we have in movements and saying that we really need each other in this moment.
Now, John, as a leader of the national movement for a Homes Guarantee, you're in touch with folks all over the country who are feeling this moment quite acutely. Many folks couldn't pay the rent on April 1st. Now it's May 1st. What are you hearing from folks and how they're preparing to address this moment?
We're hearing a lot of pain, and we're hearing people who are trying to figure out what it means to take risks in this moment. and who are struggling with this concept of a rent strike and struggling with looking at a government that clearly does not care about their well-being. And it's also made me really recognize that while we are so struggling so hard in New York State, a lot of our fights have given us the protection and safety to really move forward that doesn't happen in a lot of states around the country. So it's really like changed my perspective and been powerful to engage with people who live in states that have, you know, really red politics, and just how damaging that can be. We're hearing from folks that are trying to really keep families together and even dealing with domestic violence and the impact that it has for people not to be able to leave their place. So, you know, we're hearing what we've heard before, which is the pain and the oppression of people, but we're hearing resilience, and we're hearing how that has been exacerbated by this crisis. And we're hearing a call for people to cancel rent. We're hearing a call for the infrastructure of American society to be rebuilt. And we hear that in lots of different ways, from people talking about housing to talking about food insecurity, to talking about how their children are being educated. I think this moment is really exposing the lack of support that places like Buffalo, New York have, the lack of support that communities across the country have. And then we're hearing this tension and this rage about the fact that people are having to make these decisions in a context where people don't have money, they don't have resources, and yet, you know, the Federal Reserve is putting out trillions of dollars. They continue to see these bailouts. And I think most people are at the point now where they're saying, what am I going to do with $1,200 if I have to pay rent? What am I going to do with $1,200 if I don't know when I'm going to be able to go back to work? So we're hearing this wide range, but really it all boils down to people deeply concerned for their lives and communities, and seeing in a way that we don't get to see outside of these crises just how unconcerned our government is with supporting people, especially people of color.
John, you and other leaders in the Homes Guarantee campaign have truly been visionary in my view, in the way that you have put forward a bold and, you know, coherent and comprehensive demand for what a more humane, a more just approach to housing in this country would look like. And that's what you all are calling a homes guarantee. I'd like to play another piece of video just to introduce folks to that idea. And then Tara Raghuveer will follow up with you about that.
We live in the richest country in the world. So why do millions of people experience homelessness? Why do 12 million people spend half their paychecks on the rent? One emergency, a flat tire, or a sick kid is all that separates people like me from eviction or homelessness. People are forced to choose between putting food on the table or paying rent. How is this possible in a country of so many riches? Here's the truth. There are people who profit from our pain. People like our president who build their wealth off our community's suffering. Our people are evicted, dispossessed, displaced as corporations and the 1% extract billions. Right now, it's almost impossible to imagine a different way, to imagine that we wouldn't have to stress about paying rent. But there is another way, and we have imagined it. Our vision? A homes guarantee. It's simple. In the richest country in the history of the world, we can and we must guarantee that everyone has safe, accessible, sustainable, and permanently affordable housing. We need major action that addresses the severity of the crisis. We need a homes guarantee that will build 12 million social housing units and end homelessness. Reinvest in public housing, protect tenants, and DE-COMMODIFY housing altogether, prioritizing people over profit. A homes guarantee will provide restorative justice and jobs in communities impacted by racist housing policy. It can help us fight climate change by slashing carbon emissions and supporting sustainability in our homes. A homes guarantee sounds radical. It's not. We can and we must guarantee homes for everyone. A homes guarantee is urgently needed, morally right, and politically smart. Join us. We're going to need your support to win it.
Thanks, Tim. We have had a busy and powerful week We are in the midst of a campaign to win a rent and mortgage cancellation in the next stimulus package. The Republican government is handing out billions of dollars with no strings attached to the biggest businesses, while the rest of us are making life or death decisions about going to work, exposing our families to the virus, and keeping a home and food on the table. American billionaires during this time have gotten $280 billion richer since COVID started. Last week, Congress passed and Trump signed into law a supplement to the stimulus that had no support for the 30 million of us who are now unemployed, no support for cities and states that are on the front lines of responding to the crisis and on the verge of bankruptcy, and no rent or mortgage assistance, and definitely not a rent cancellation. 30 million people have lost their jobs. That's 1 in 6 Americans, or 1 in 6 workers in America. No one is untouched by this crisis. No one. And there were many people struggling to pay the rent even before the pandemic. 47% of renters actually spent more than a third of their income on the rent pre-pandemic, while 25 million people were paying over 50% of their income in their rent check to their landlord every month. People have been making choices between food and rent, accruing debts, and at risk of being forced from their homes even before the pandemic hit. And now millions of people couldn't make their rent on April 1st, and today is May 1st. The rent is due again, and millions more will not be able to pay it. We've never lived through a disruption this immense, and there's power in that. Like Harmony was saying before, with every crisis, there's an opportunity, and the question is what we make of it. As millions can't pay, rents are being canceled whether or not Congress legislates it. So we've written a bill that would cancel rents and mortgages through responsible policy. And Representative Omar actually introduced this bill with us on April 17th. Since then, we've been organizing, and 23 co-sponsors are now signed on to the bill. We're working on a Senate companion that will be introduced next week, and we've organized tens of thousands of tenants across the country to demand action by calling into their representatives, taking action in the streets, and channeling their stories into social media so that we can see the growing public outcry. I'm calling you from Kansas City, Missouri, and in Kansas City, we've been part of starting a statewide coalition to protect Missouri tenants. Our state is ranked among the very worst in the country right now in terms of our governor's response, both to COVID and to housing and homelessness crises that were existent before COVID and now, of course, exacerbated and exposed by the crisis. Just yesterday, judges in Kansas City began eviction hearings by phone. Let me say that again. Yesterday, 75 tenants in Kansas City faced eviction proceedings by conference call. And ironically, Kansas City is one of the places where we actually fought for and won one of the most robust eviction moratoriums in the state. We always knew, though, that the moratoriums would not save us. We've been demanding that the governor take action to protect Missouri tenants for over 6 weeks now. Not only has he failed to act, but Governor Mike Parson has actually decided to open the state back up for business next week, and he's about to oversee a mass displacement unlike anything we've ever seen in Missouri before. So we've been taking to the streets. We did a few virtual rallies and they went well, but we know that direct action works best when we take collective action and bring the crisis to its creators or to the targets who have the power to actually change and solve and mitigate our suffering. So last Monday, we lined cars up along the entire width of the state, from Kansas City to St. Louis. We took over the interstate with cars every 5 miles along the shoulder of the highway. And just yesterday, we descended on the Capitol in Jefferson City while observing strict social distance guidelines, and we staged a rally and a people's hearing to evict the governor for defaulting on his responsibility to protect and serve the people of Missouri. We've been developing beautiful, radical statewide solidarity, centering the experiences of impacted tenants and people experiencing homelessness, and building the power to win immediate relief as well as long-term systemic change.
I was laid off 3 weeks ago in a week of panic because of the growing COVID-19 pandemic. I can't say that I was surprised, but it still hit me hard. Whatever initial sadness and shame I felt is gone. Now I'm just furious. My husband Derek is out of work as well.
By no fault of our own, we're being pushed to the brink. I couldn't pay my rent on April 1st. I won't be able to pay May 1st. No one should be expected to make any payments during this time. No payments, no late fees, no debt.
Tara, that was Tiana Caldwell, one of the fearless leaders who's joined you at the front lines at protests in Kansas City, describing some of the challenges she's faced and how the situation has changed since the start of COVID-19. What are some of the things you're hearing from her and from other leaders in Kansas City?
Well, the first thing that I want to share is that Tiana is angry, right? I think she spent a few weeks since she was laid off 5 weeks ago. She spent a few weeks feeling sad and isolated and feeling ashamed. And she just said in front of the Capitol yesterday that she's now angry. She's enraged because finally she's understood that this is actually not a crisis of her making, of course, and she's not alone, right? This is a situation that could have been a lot less intense and a lot less filled with suffering for her and her family if our political leaders had taken action before this pandemic hit. And now during the pandemic, they've done nothing to protect her and her family. So Tiana is enraged. And actually today, she's one of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of tenants who's participating in the largest rent strike in world history. She is identifying as a rent striker, and her target is not so much her individual landlord, but rather the state. Right? All of these tenants across the country are going on rent strike, demanding that the federal government and that their governors take action to cancel rent and mortgage payments. So that's a little bit about Tiana, and I think her experience is reflective of so many more experiences across the country.
Of course, here at People's Action, we're always thinking about not just how to understand the moment we're in, but what we can do. And there are some concrete things that we can do right now, one of which is to join the call for a national people's bailout. There's an action soon after this call at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and I'd like to play one more clip for you that shares a little information about that.
Trump's government gave money to the banks. They gave it to big business. They're talking about giving it to the insurance companies. We got a one-time check that doesn't pay the bills, and that's not enough. We need a people's bailout, and we need it now. That means healthcare for everyone, no exceptions, and protective gear for frontline workers. It means direct cash assistance to every person until this crisis is over. It means stopping evictions and suspending rent and mortgage payments. And it means getting systems in place to end this crisis and prevent the next. The only way to get through this is together. We're all doing so much to take care of each other, but we deserve a government that cares too. Tell Congress we need a people's bailout now.
So that, what we're calling the People's Bailout, is a national call that we have joined as a group, and there will be tens of thousands of folks who are joining a national virtual action this afternoon at 2 o'clock p.m. online. If you're interested in that, you can go to #PeoplesBailout to find out more about that action and how you can join. And of course, if you want to learn more about our Homes Guarantee campaign, that's #HomesGuarantee or homesguarantee.com. All of our campaigns have a home at peoplesaction.org. And of course, if you go to peoplesaction.org/crisis, we will be posting more information from our political education campaign and also links to more ways that you can get involved where you are at any time. I'd like to thank all of our guests today, Harmony Goldberg, John Washington, and Tara Raghuveer. Thank you so much for what you're doing where you are, fighting the good fight, and we can do this. Thanks for joining us on People's Action Live. We'll see you next time.